Today's story explores how the most feared species in the galaxy, the Xarkis Dominion, made one fatal mistake. They went to war with humanity. A tale of defiance, war, and the sheer will of the human spirit. Let's dive in. Before dive-in request. If you're enjoying the story and the effort I put into creating these immersive, high-quality narratives, I would greatly appreciate your support. A simple like, share, and subscription not only helps me keep delivering these epic tales, but also motivates me to continue working hard to bring you more amazing content. Thank you for being a part of this journey. The mistake that changed everything. For centuries, the Xarkis Dominion had been the galaxy's most feared and unchallenged empire. Their warriors were invincible, their fleets unmatchable, and their domination absolute. Every world they conquered bent its knee to their will, or was destroyed. There were whispers of their merciless cruelty, of the countless species they had enslaved, the colonies they had burned, and the countless planets that were wiped from existence. But none dared oppose them until they met humanity. Earth's response. It all began as a diplomatic mission, a routine negotiation between the United Terran Federation, UTF, and the Xarkis. The humans were eager to forge an alliance to expand their influence across the stars. Ambassador Elias Carter was selected to represent humanity's interests. A man known for his charm, wit, and diplomatic finesse, Carter had worked tirelessly to ensure that humanity would find its place in the galactic fold. But the Xarkis had a different agenda. The UTF diplomatic envoy, led by Carter, arrived on Xarkis Prime with hopes of peaceful negotiation. Instead, the humans were met with a bloody betrayal. Without warning, the Xarkis' Supreme Warlord ordered their execution, publicly, for all the galaxy to witness. The message was clear: bow or burn. The video feed was broadcasted across the stars, showing Ambassador Carter kneeling before the Xarkis' throne, bloodied but defiant. The cameras captured his last words, his steady voice cutting through the silence. "You do not understand. Humanity will never bow." And then, the feed cut to black. The war room on Earth. The war room was silent. President Elias Carter, namesake of his now deceased father, stood at the head of the table. His face was pale, but his eyes burned with determination. The hum of holographic projections filled the room, detailing the destruction of humanity's ambassadors, the brutal execution of the diplomatic envoy, and the firestorm that had erupted across the galaxy. Admiral Tobias Kane, leader of the UTF Navy, clenched his fists in anger. "We cannot allow this to go unpunished. They've made a mistake. They've underestimated humanity." His words hung heavy in the air, the reality of what the Xarkis had just done sinking in. Humanity was no longer going to be a passive observer in galactic affairs. The United Terran Federation was prepared to take action, but this time, it would be a fight for survival. President Carter turned to the council, his voice low but intense. "We do not negotiate with terrorists. This was no mistake. The Xarkis wanted war, and war they shall have." The decision. A hushed silence filled the room. Admiral Kane's expression darkened. "How long until our fleet is ready?" Steele, the Supreme General of the UTF, stood with military precision. His eyes were sharp, his posture rigid. 5 hours. We have everything we need." The assembly broke into action. Ships were mobilized, orders were given. The Exterminatus protocol was activated. Humanity would not simply respond to the Xarkis, they would make an example of them. "What would you do?" President Carter looked around at his trusted advisors and commanders. "We strike first. We hit them where it hurts." The generals nodded in agreement, but Steele was quick to voice his thoughts. "We will break them, but we must be careful. They will retaliate with everything they have." "What do we do when they come for us?" asked the young lieutenant in the back of the room, his voice laced with uncertainty. "How do we stop them?" Carter turned to him, his expression solemn but resolute. We do what humanity always does. We fight. We rise above them. The call to arms. With the decision made, the UTF fleet prepared for war. The first wave would be fast, calculated, and brutal. The Xarkis thought they could snuff out humanity with a single execution. Instead, humanity would show them the full force of its defiance. Admiral Kane turned to his officers, ready to give the order. We move out in 2 hours. Prepare for total war. Humanity's defiance. As the fleet powered up, communications across Earth began to light up with reports. Humanity's resolve was made clear. No surrender, no retreat. There would be no peace talks, no pleas for mercy. The UTF would not negotiate. And as the fleets began to slip into hyperspace, one question echoed across the hearts and minds of every Terran. What would you do if you were faced with impossible odds? Would you take the risk? Enjoying the story so far? Want to see how humanity rises to face the greatest challenge in galactic history? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to HFY Genesis for more epic sci-fi tales. Your support keeps these stories coming, and I can't wait to share the rest of this journey with you. What will humanity do next? Will they strike first and win, or will the Xarkis push back harder than ever before? Stay tuned for the next chapter. A humble beginning. The decision to declare war was not made lightly. In the quiet moments before the mobilization orders were given, the weight of the situation rested heavily on President Elias Carter. He stood alone in the war room, staring out at the vast expanse of Earth, wondering if there would ever be a time when humans would no longer be required to fight for their place in the universe. We have no choice, he whispered to himself. The echo of the Xarkis' brutal act rang in his mind. They had made humanity their enemy, and now humanity would show them what happened when they pushed the most relentless species in the galaxy to the brink. Behind him, the sounds of the assembly room, discussions, commands, preparations were almost a blur. The entire military command structure was shifting into full action mode. The fleet was already beginning to mobilize, but it was his decision to take humanity to war. This was his responsibility. How many lives will be lost? Carter asked, more to himself than anyone else. He wasn't a war hero. He had never wanted this. The thought of so many lives caught in the crossfire weighed heavily on him. Yet he knew that humanity could no longer afford to be a passive player on the galactic stage. The thought of the Xarkis Dominion, a species that had burned countless planets, wiped out civilizations, and enslaved countless innocents, tore through his mind. This was not just about retaliation. This was about sending a message. Humanity would not be silenced. A decision for humanity. General Marcus Steele, head of the UTF military, stood next to the holographic map, his face stone cold. It was clear that this was his domain. The harsh reality of the battlefield was nothing new to him. But even for a man as experienced as Steele, there was a grim determination in his eyes. The Xarkis had drawn first blood. Now it was time to make them regret it. President Carter, Steele began, his voice steady but heavy with the burden of the coming war. We've already begun the first phase of mobilization. The 5th and 7th fleets are ready for deployment. We'll need full authorization to launch the first strike. There's no turning back now. Carter took a deep breath and faced Steele. This was his moment. The weight of humanity's future hung on his decision. Do it, Carter said firmly. Initiate Operation Hammerfall. Steele's eyes narrowed. He had known this was coming, but hearing the words finally spoken was different. We'll make sure they never forget what happens when you provoke humanity, he said, his tone resolute. The decision was made. Humanity would fight. Preparing for war. The UTS Warbringer, one of the most powerful ships in the UTF fleet, was now ready for the first assault. Admiral Tobias Kane, ever the tactician, stood at the helm of the ship as it prepared to depart for the Xarkis-controlled world of Dravenus IV, a critical military outpost. The Xarkis believed it was safe, untouchable. but they didn't know what they had just awoken. Kane looked at the screen in front of him, watching the first of humanity's warships take position in the vast expanse of space. His hands tightened on the controls, but his expression remained cool. He knew this was no ordinary mission. The fate of humanity rested on their success. But failure, that wasn't an option. "We strike first," Kane muttered to himself. He knew how the Xarkis would respond once the war began, but he wouldn't give them the chance to retaliate first. At that very moment, in every military base, soldiers, engineers, and tacticians were finalizing their equipment, calibrating their weapons, and preparing for the unknown. In deep space, human warships were jumping to hyperspace, their mission simple: strike hard, strike fast, and take no prisoners. The UTF Marines, humanity's elite ground forces, were ready to deploy. Known for their efficiency, brutality, and precise tactics, they had been enhanced with the most advanced technology available. The Onyx Legion, the pride of the Terran military, would spearhead the ground assault, their black armor a symbol of terror across the galaxy. The first bombs. As the Warbringer and its fleet moved toward their target, the first wave of orbital bombardments began. The drumbeats of war thundered in space. Plasma missiles cut through the sky above Dravonis 4, tearing apart the Xarkis' defenses, the first step in ensuring the planet's military infrastructure would never fire another shot at humanity. "Prepare for ground insertion," Steele ordered, as he watched the destruction from a command station. "We won't give them time to regroup." The Onyx Legion prepared to descend on the planet. Their drop pods would puncture through the atmosphere at hypersonic speeds, crashing into the Xarkis' military bases with deadly precision. There would be no mercy. Kane's voice echoed across the fleet. "This is our chance, people. They've made their choice, and now we're going to show them what happens when you provoke the wrong species." The final countdown, humanity had long since realized that it would never be given a seat at the table of the great galactic powers. The Xarkis had made it clear there would be no peaceful coexistence. The time for diplomacy had ended, and now it was time for humanity to prove its worth. They would strike with all the fury and wrath that had been building up for centuries. The stars would burn with humanity's defiance. And as the clock ticked down to zero, President Carter sat in his private quarters, eyes staring at the map of the galaxy. He had made the decision, but now the consequences were real. The war was coming. Would humanity be ready? What would you do if your species was pushed to the brink? What would you do if the galaxy's most feared empire decided to destroy you? Would you fight back, or would you fall into submission, enjoying the tension and buildup of humanity's war for survival? Want to know how they'll strike back at the Xarkis? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to HFY Genesis for more epic sci-fi tales. Your support fuels the next chapters of humanity's defiance. The first move. The void of space was silent. It always was. But for Admiral Tobias Kane, the silence felt almost deafening. The 5th and 7th Fleets had entered the Xarkis system, the last frontier before war. The stakes were set. Humanity's first strike was ready to unfold, and Kane could feel the tension in the very air on the bridge of the UTS Warbringer, the largest Terran dreadnought. Kane stood in front of the massive viewports, watching as the stars bent and stretched, giving way to the dark shape of Xarkis Prime, the heart of their empire. His jaw was clenched, his pulse steady, every fiber of his being honed for this moment. This was the beginning. He could feel the weight of humanity's future bearing down on him. If this failed, it would be humanity's end. "Admiral, all systems are green," reported Lieutenant Sato, his voice steady but sharp. "We are ready to launch." Kane turned to face his crew, locking eyes with each of them. He could see the fire in their eyes, the resolve to end this threat once and for all. His voice was calm, but the steel in it was unmistakable. "Strike hard, strike fast. Make them regret ever provoking us." He paused, letting the gravity of his words settle. This is for humanity. The wrath of humanity. As the UTF fleet moved into its assault position, the first wave of fire began. The Warbringer unleashed its massive railguns, each shell traveling faster than light, tearing through the void and slamming into Xarkis Prime's defenses. The impact was cataclysmic, with shockwaves rippling out from the epicenter, obliterating enemy turrets and orbital defense stations. "Fire again!" Kane shouted. The dreadnought's massive cannons roared once more, shaking the ship as energy cascaded into the distance. Xarkis Prime's once pristine orbital defenses, the pride of the Dominion, were now a distant memory. Humanity's message was clear. The first blow had been struck. Admiral Kane's heart beat faster. This was only the beginning. He watched the destruction unfold, knowing that this wouldn't be enough. The Xarkis would retaliate. But this was humanity's moment to prove its worth, and they wouldn't be silenced. Not this time. The Onyx Legion's descent, with orbital bombardment, ensuring that Xarkis's planetary defense systems were in ruins. It was time for the Onyx Legion to make their mark. General Steele stood in the drop bay of the Warbringer, facing the fierce soldiers who would lead the charge. His black-armored soldiers, silent and deadly, stood in perfect formation. "Ready for deployment," Steele said, his voice cutting through the hum of the ship's systems. His eyes scanned the Legion before him. Each soldier was a testament to humanity's ability to adapt, evolve, and fight. Each one enhanced with cybernetic augmentations that made them the most efficient killing machines in the galaxy. The drop pods engaged, and within moments, thousands of Onyx legionaries were rocketing toward the surface of Xarkis Prime. They would land in the heart of the enemy's strongholds, tearing through enemy lines with ruthless efficiency. Humanity's presence on the planet would be undeniable. Kane watched the descent from the bridge, his mind focused on the mission ahead. "Prepare for Phase 2, he ordered. "We've given them the first blow, but now we finish it." On the surface of Xarkis Prime, the Xarkis Dominion had not yet fully realized the scope of the attack. Supreme Warlord Corvex, the leader of the Dominion's military forces, stared out at the planet's battered defenses. His once feared fleet had been crippled in the first assault. There was no time to recover, no time to reorganize. His claws gripped the command chair as he raged silently. How had this happened? The Xarkis were the apex predators of the galaxy. They were supposed to dominate every species they encountered. And yet, humanity had turned the tables. "Mobilize the fleet," Corvex growled. "Prepare for a counterattack. We will burn them to the ground." But as his orders were carried out, Corvex knew this wouldn't be easy. Humanity was not like the other civilizations the Xarkis had crushed in the past. They were different, resilient, and relentless. This would be a war unlike any the Xarkis had ever waged, and humanity was only getting started. The ground battle. The Onyx Legion hit the ground with the ferocity of a storm. Their drop pods smashed into the surface of Xarkis Prime, and within moments, they began to spread across the landscape. The Xarkis were scrambling to respond, but the Onyx legionaries were already in their midst. Buildings collapsed as the soldiers moved swiftly, clearing out strategic positions and overwhelming Xarkis defenses with surgical precision. The shock troopers, armed with pulse rifles, explosives, and advanced technology, cut through enemy forces like a blade through butter. Xarkis soldiers, though formidable, were no match for the sheer intensity and speed of humanity's strike. Everywhere the Onyx Legion moved, destruction followed. They took no prisoners, offered no mercy. Their mission was simple: to break the will of the enemy and send a clear message to the rest of the galaxy. The turning point. Back aboard the Warbringer, Admiral Kane and General Steele watched as the chaos unfolded on their screens. The Xarkis were losing ground, but the fleet was not yet out of danger. "Admiral," said Lieutenant Sato, her voice rising with urgency, "we've detected Xarkis reinforcements on the far side of the planet." Kane's expression darkened. "They'll be too late," he said firmly. "They're already broken." But still, the Xarkis continued to rally, their forces desperate to maintain some semblance of control. For the first time in their history, they were being driven back, and humanity's wrath had only just begun. Enjoying the battle so far? Want to see how humanity's strike unfolds and how the Xarkis will retaliate? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to HFY Genesis for more epic sci-fi tales. Your support helps bring the next chapter of humanity's rise to power. Want to find out what happens next in humanity's war for survival? Stay tuned for the next chapter. The Xarkis had learned something invaluable in the heat of battle. Humanity was relentless. They would not break. They would not falter. And now, the Xarkis were forced to face the consequences of their arrogance. A galaxy once dominated by the Xarkis was now rising against them. A massive coalition of species, all united by a single purpose: to stop the Xarkis' empire. The Onyx Legion continued to sweep across Xarkis Prime, but the resistance was growing fiercer. Xarkis soldiers, equipped with the finest technology their empire had to offer, were now fighting to the death, knowing their world was lost. The tide of war turns. As the ground war intensified, Admiral Kane received the report. His fleet was under heavy attack. The Xarkis' fleet had arrived in full force, and they were challenging humanity's grip on the galaxy. "Captain Voss," Kane barked as his fleet engaged the enemy. "We've got to hold them off long enough for the ground teams to secure the last few strongholds." Voss nodded. "Understood, Admiral. We'll hit them where it hurts." The Warbringer and its fleet maneuvered deftly, engaging the Xarkis' ships in deep space. Plasma weapons blazed, turrets fired, and the void was filled with the roar of battle. But despite humanity's relentless assault, the Xarkis weren't backing down. They had their final weapon, and it would soon be unleashed. Kane's heart pounded. He knew the next move would decide it all. The Xarkis would not fall without one last desperate fight, and humanity was running out of time. Reflection. The cost of war. As the Xarkis Dominion turned the tide of battle in space, President Carter stood before a war council. His face was grim, his mind focused on the task at hand. "How much longer can we sustain this?" Carter asked, his voice heavy with the weight of the decision. "Are we ready for what's coming next?" General Steele looked up from the map. "They're desperate, but we have one thing they don't: unity. We don't stop until they're finished." Carter stared at the map of the galaxy, his finger hovering over the next step. Humanity had gone to war, but the cost was rising. The Xarkis were relentless, and there was no going back. The question hung in the air. What would it take to end this war once and for all? Enjoying the escalating battle and the intense stakes of humanity's war for survival. Want to see how humanity will fight back against the growing power of the Xarkis? Like, share, and subscribe to HFY Genesis to keep up with every twist and turn in this epic tale. The Xarkis had learned something invaluable in the heat of battle. Humanity was relentless. They would not break. They would not falter. And now, the Xarkis were forced to face the consequences of their arrogance. A galaxy once dominated by the Xarkis was now rising against them. A massive coalition of species, all united by a single purpose: to stop the Xarkis' empire. The Onyx Legion continued to sweep across Xarkis Prime, but the resistance was growing fiercer. Xarkis soldiers, equipped with the finest technology their empire had to offer, were now fighting to the death, knowing their world was lost. The tide of war turns. As the ground war intensified, Admiral Kane received the report. His fleet was under heavy attack. The Xarkis' fleet had arrived in full force, and they were challenging humanity's grip on the galaxy. "Captain Voss," Kane barked as his fleet engaged the enemy. "We've got to hold them off long enough for the ground teams to secure the last few strongholds." Voss nodded. "Understood, Admiral. We'll hit them where it hurts." The Warbringer and its fleet maneuvered deftly, engaging the Xarkis' ships in deep space. Plasma weapons blazed, turrets fired, and the void was filled with the roar of battle. But despite humanity's relentless assault, the Xarkis weren't backing down. They had their final weapon, and it would soon be unleashed. Kane's heart pounded. He knew the next move would decide it all. The Xarkis would not fall without one last desperate fight, and humanity was running out of time. Reflection. The cost of war. As the Xarkis Dominion turned the tide of battle in space, President Carter stood before a war council. His face was grim, his mind focused on the task at hand. "How much longer can we sustain this?" Carter asked, his voice heavy with the weight of the decision. "Are we ready for what's coming next?" General Steele looked up from the map. "They're desperate, but we have one thing they don't: unity. We don't stop until they're finished." Carter stared at the map of the galaxy, his finger hovering over the next step. Humanity had gone to war, but the cost was rising. The Xarkis were relentless, and there was no going back. The question hung in the air. What would it take to end this war once and for all? Enjoying the escalating battle and the intense stakes of humanity's war for survival. Want to see how humanity will fight back against the growing power of the Xarkis? Like, share, and subscribe to HFY Genesis to keep up with every twist and turn in this epic tale. The moment of truth. Humanity had already proven its might. The Xarkis Dominion, the once undefeated empire, was on the brink of collapse. But despite all their victories, Admiral Kane couldn't shake the feeling that something far worse was looming on the horizon. Standing on the bridge of the UTS Warbringer, Kane watched as Xarkis Prime appeared on the view screen, its once proud, powerful cities now reduced to ash. Humanity had destroyed their orbital defenses, crippled their fleet, and decimated their strongholds. The ground battle had been nothing short of a massacre, with Onyx legionnaires advancing with unmatched efficiency. But this was far from over. "We've broken them," Lieutenant Sato said, her voice a mix of disbelief and caution as she stood beside him. "The Xarkis fleet is in retreat. We've won this battle. We've won the war." Kane didn't turn his eyes from the screen. The silence on the bridge was palpable, a heavy stillness that seemed to hang in the air. He wasn't sure if the victory was worth celebrating just yet. His mind drifted back to the earlier reports. The Xarkis were not broken, they were hiding. And there were whispers of something far more sinister in the dark corners of the galaxy. The final weapon that had been whispered about in classified Xarkis intel. "Victory is premature," Kane muttered. "We need to prepare for what comes next." The hidden weapon. Back on Earth, President Carter sat in the command center, a map of the galaxy flickering before him. He had seen the destruction on Xarkis Prime, seen the countless victories, but there was something in the reports that gnawed at him. The Xarkis Dominion was no ordinary enemy. It was an empire of conquerors, driven by a centuries-old belief in their superiority, and Carter had learned long ago that empires like that didn't fall easily. "General Steele," Carter said, his voice calm but unwavering, "what's the status of the fleet? Are we ready for the next phase?" Steele, now standing beside him, gave a short nod. "We're ready, Mr. President. The fleets are prepared. An Onyx Legion is standing by for additional ground operations. But I'm concerned, sir. There's a dark rumor. The Xarkis have one last weapon, something they've kept hidden for centuries. The Black Sun Project." Carter raised an eyebrow, his fingers tightening around the edge of the map. "What is this weapon?" "We don't have full details, but intelligence suggests it could be an extragalactic weapon, something capable of destroying entire star systems in one stroke. If that's true..." Steele paused, his expression darkening. "It could be more dangerous than anything we've encountered." Carter stood up, his face set in grim determination. "If that's true, we're not just fighting for survival anymore. We're fighting to save the entire galaxy." The Xarkis' last gamble. In the shattered remains of their command centers, the Xarkis Dominion scrambled to mobilize their final weapon. The remnants of their leadership, now a council of desperate leaders, gathered in secret. Corvex, the Supreme Warlord, stood before them, his anger barely contained. "Humanity has pushed us to the edge of extinction," he snarled, his mandibles clicking with fury. "But they will not wipe us out. We will take their precious galaxy from them, starting with their homeworld." His generals stared at him, fear and resolve warring in their eyes. But Corvex was already moving forward, his mind set on one final strike. "Prepare the Black Sun weapon. We will retaliate, and we will make humanity regret ever standing against the Dominion." For the first time in the war, the Xarkis Dominion's true power, their ultimate weapon, would be unleashed. The Black Sun project was ready. Humanity's response. Back on Earth, President Carter knew the next few days would decide the future of humanity. The Xarkis were desperate, but that desperation had a terrifying edge. If the rumors about the Black Sun project were true, they were about to face a weapon unlike any they had ever seen. "Ready the fleet," Carter ordered, his voice steady, despite the storm of thoughts rushing through his mind. "If the Xarkis want to end us, we're not going to make it easy. We end this here now. We strike before they can unleash that weapon." Kane's voice echoed across the comms. "We're prepared, sir. Warships have entered position. The enemy is unaware of our full force. We strike tonight." The final assault. As night fell across Earth, the UTF fleet made its final approach toward the Xarkis' last stronghold. Kane stood on the bridge of the Warbringer, his expression resolute. "This is it. Our last chance to end this before they can use the Black Sun," Kane said to his crew. "Give them no time to react. Fire everything we have." The Xarkis had no idea that humanity was already moving toward them, already preparing for the final confrontation. It wasn't just a battle. It was a galactic decision. If humanity succeeded, they would secure their place in the stars. But if they failed, the galaxy would fall to the fury of the Xarkis. Deparate gamble. As the final battle raged in space and on the ground, the Onyx Legion and UTF fleet pressed forward. Every fighter, every ship, every soldier was pushing forward into the heart of enemy territory. But the Black Sun was already beginning its ignition sequence. The Xarkis were determined to make one final desperate play. Turning the tides, humanity was on the edge of victory until the Black Sun weapon was activated. The first wave of energy from the weapon shot into space, a ripple of destruction that disrupted gravity and shattered nearby moons. "Admiral, they've launched it," Lieutenant Sato shouted, panic creeping into her voice. "We've lost contact with the fleet," another officer yelled. Kane's heart skipped a beat, but his expression remained unchanged. "Focus! Get the fleet back online! We're not done yet!" As the Black Sun's power reached critical levels, humanity's only chance was to infiltrate the Xarkis control centers. Steel's forces, now battling deep within the heart of Xarkis Prime, were humanity's last line of defense. "Time to end this," Steel muttered, charging toward the control core. This would be the final turning point. The stakes are higher than ever. Will humanity defeat the Xarkis and their ultimate weapon, or will the galaxy fall to ruin? Like, share, and subscribe to HFY Genesis for more thrilling sci-fi action, and join us as we discover what happens next in the fight for humanity's survival. The Shattered Empire. The war had been long and brutal, but humanity had claimed victory. At least, that's what everyone believed. Xarkis Prime, the heart of the Xarkis Dominion, lay in ruin, its cities leveled and its military crippled. The Onyx Legion had swept through the remnants of the Xarkis strongholds, leaving nothing but ashes and broken pride. But even as humanity stood victorious, a sense of dread lingered in the air. The Xarkis Dominion had been the most feared empire in the galaxy for centuries. It wasn't over yet. Far from the devastated streets of Xarkis Prime, Corvex, the Supreme Warlord, stood alone in the darkened remains of his command center. The once mighty leader of the Xarkis had become a mere shadow, driven into hiding as his empire crumbled around him. His fleet had been obliterated, his cities reduced to dust. His forces, though fierce, had failed to stop the human tide. For a moment, Korvex felt nothing but rage. His mandibles clicked together in a slow, rhythmic sound, grinding through the remnants of his fury. He had underestimated humanity. They were too resilient, too relentless. "We are not finished yet," he muttered, his voice a low growl. His words echoed through the empty chambers, falling on nothing but the debris left behind by his once great empire. In the distance, the Black Sun Project, the ultimate weapon that had been humanity's greatest fear, lay dormant, but still potent. Korvex had one final chance, a weapon so powerful it could turn the tide of the war in an instant. If humanity thought they had won, they had no idea what was coming. The fleet stands ready. Meanwhile, aboard the UTS Warbringer, Admiral Kane felt the weight of the galaxy shift on his shoulders. He had led humanity to victory, and yet he couldn't shake the unease gnawing at him. They had crushed the Xarkis fleet, destroyed their most formidable defenses, but something about Korvex's disappearance felt like the calm before a storm. Was the war truly over? Or was there more to the Xarkis' fury than humanity could comprehend? Standing in front of the tactical display, Kane clenched his fists. He had won battles, but the war had cost him more than he was willing to admit. He had lost friends, soldiers, and countless lives had been sacrificed. Humanity had pushed the Xarkis to the brink, but could they truly hold their ground? "We can't afford to relax," Kane muttered to himself, his eyes tracing the map of Xarkis Prime on the holographic screen. The UTF fleet remained at the ready, but his gut told him that this wasn't over, not yet. "Admiral," a voice broke through his thoughts. It was Lieutenant Sato. "We've received a transmission from General Steele. He's at the heart of Xarkis Prime, but he reports strange readings. They've found something." Kane's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, strange readings?" Sato hesitated. "We're not sure, but the energy signatures are consistent with, well, with the Black Sun Project. A final weapon unleashed. Back on Xarkis Prime, General Steele stood at the epicenter of the ruins, the faint hum of alien technology still crackling through the air. His mission was clear: confirm the existence of the Black Sun and neutralize it. But even as he stood there, something didn't feel right. The ruins of the Xarkis stronghold were quiet, too quiet, as if the air itself held its breath. Steele's instincts were honed from years of combat, but nothing had prepared him for the enormity of the situation. The Black Sun Project was real, and its implications were far worse than anyone had imagined. "This cannot happen," Steele said to himself, his voice echoing in the desolate hall. His fingers hovered over his comms device as he called in the sapper teams. "Sir, we've secured the perimeter, but there's something wrong with the power grid," one of his soldiers reported over the comms. "It's like something is reactivating in the central core." Steele's heart raced. "What do you mean by reactivating?" The soldier's voice crackled. "We've got a power surge, sir. The Black Sun is charging up. We don't have much time." The last gamble, Korvex, his face twisted in malice and rage, stood before the glowing holographic map that had been the heart of the Black Sun Project. He had lost everything: his fleet, his empire. But now, he had humanity's future within his grasp. The final weapon was ready to fire. He just needed to reach the final activation point. "Humanity's pride will be their downfall," Korvex hissed as he keyed in the final sequence. The weapon's energy core flared to life, sending a shockwave of raw power coursing through the control room. The destruction he would unleash would be unimaginable. Back on Earth, President Carter stood at the helm of the war room, his mind whirling with thoughts of the Xarkis' final move. Despite all the victories, despite humanity's advances, something unseen still loomed over them. The Black Sun was a weapon beyond anything they had faced. "Activate all defense protocols." Carter's voice was ice. "We have to stop this now. If Korvex succeeds, the galaxy will be ours to lose." Humanity's last stand. As the final surge of energy crackled through the Black Sun's core, a series of alarms rang out across the UTF fleet. General Steele, at the heart of Xarkis Prime, understood that they were now in a race against time. "We can't let them fire it," Steele growled. The Onyx Legion was on the ground, but the Xarkis were now pushing back harder than ever before. There was only one option left: to destroy the Black Sun once and for all. Corvex had gambled everything on humanity's downfall. But humanity wasn't done yet. This wasn't just about defeating the Xarkis. This was about proving that no empire, no matter how mighty, would ever have the power to crush humanity. The moment had come. Humanity was not just surviving anymore. They were rising. The aftermath of war. The battlefield had fallen silent. The once mighty Xarkis Dominion was no more. The war that had raged for years had finally come to an end. Humanity had survived, but at what cost? The echoes of battle still resonated throughout the galaxy, but now all that remained was the debris of a shattered empire and the survivors of a war that would go down in history as the greatest triumph of the human race. Admiral Kane stood on the bridge of the UTS Warbringer, his eyes fixed on the remnants of the Xarkis fleet drifting in space. The stars outside were quiet now, but the scars of the conflict would last forever. He had led humanity to victory, but it was a victory marked by sacrifice. His mind replayed the faces of those he had lost, the brave soldiers of the Onyx Legion, the civilians caught in the crossfire, the family members waiting for news that would never come. The price of war was steep, and though they had emerged victorious, the human cost was undeniable. "Admiral," Lieutenant Sato's voice interrupted his thoughts. "We've received a transmission from Earth. The President is requesting your presence in the command center." Kane nodded silently, his expression hard. Let's see what they have to say. Humanity's new place in the galaxy. President Carter sat alone in the command center, the weight of the world on his shoulders. The victory over the Xarkis had been celebrated, but he could feel the shifting tides. The galaxy had changed. No longer were the Xarkis the unchallenged rulers of the stars. Humanity now stood at the top, but the question loomed large. What would humanity do with this newfound power? As Admiral Kane entered, Carter gave him a somber nod. "You did it, Admiral. You defeated the Xarkis." "But at what cost?" Kane's voice was heavy with regret. "We lost too many. Too much." Carter turned his gaze to the large holographic map of the galaxy. "You've given humanity a chance to carve out a future among the stars, but the galaxy isn't going to be the same. We've changed things forever." Kane crossed his arms, looking down at the map. He had spent so long focused on the battle, on the immediate goal of defeating the Xarkis, that he had never truly considered the future. Now, with the weight of victory settling on his shoulders, he couldn't help but wonder, what now? What happens next? Carter let the silence settle between them before speaking again. "We have to make sure that what happened to the Xarkis never happens again. We've built something new, something better, but with this power comes a responsibility we must never forget. Humanity has to lead, not just for our own survival, but for the galaxy as a whole." Kane was silent for a long moment, his thoughts turning inward. The humans had always prided themselves on their resolve, their ability to adapt and survive. But now they were in charge, and the future was an unknown. The galaxy was no longer a place of threats they had to survive, but a place where they had to lead. What would humanity become now? Would they build an empire? Would they bring peace? Or would they repeat the same mistakes of the Xarkis, fueled by pride and conquest? These were questions with no easy answers. "We won the war," Kane said finally, his voice quieter than before. "But the real battle starts now. The Xarkis are gone, but there are still other empires out there, other species, and they'll be watching us. We can't afford to become what they were." Carter turned to face him, his face etched with weariness but determination. "That's why we need to ensure unity. Humanity has fought hard for its place, but it needs to prove that we can be more than conquerors. We have to lead with strength and wisdom, not just power. We are the survivors, but we are also the ones who must build new alliances and new threats. In the days that followed, humanity began to rebuild. The war had shattered the Xarkis Dominion, but it had also created a void in the galaxy, one that would soon be filled. Other species watched as humanity stepped forward, eyes wary but hopeful. For the first time in centuries, the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted, and humanity now had a choice: to rule, to conquer, or to create something new. The Galactic Council was reformed, with humans at the helm. No longer would they be outsiders to the larger powers in the galaxy. Humanity would sit among the great species of the stars, equal to the others, respected for its strength and its resolve. But this new alliance would require more than just victory. It would require trust, cooperation, and the willingness to build something lasting. As Carter looked out at the stars, he knew there was no turning back. The war had changed everything, and it was time for humanity to decide what kind of future it would shape. Humanity's legacy. Admiral Kane and President Carter both knew that the galaxy would never be the same. The Xarkis were defeated, but the true test was yet to come. The future would require a delicate balance between power and responsibility. The choices humanity made now would determine the fate of the galaxy for centuries to come. What kind of leaders will we be? Kane wondered aloud, the weight of his own thoughts pressing on him. The right kind, Carter replied. We will lead by example. We will show the galaxy that humanity doesn't just survive, it thrives. We will be the future, but the future must be one built on unity, compassion, and strength. The war was over. Humanity had survived. Now it was time to build. If you're enjoying the story and the effort I put into creating these immersive, high-quality narratives, I would greatly appreciate your support. A simple like, share, and subscription not only helps me keep delivering these epic tales, but also motivates me to continue working hard to bring you more amazing content. Thank you for being a part of this journey.